Alright, so today I'm going to show you some command line basics, just some of the basics for navigating the command line of the EdgeRouter. Not just for navigation, but to configure a few things, and I'll show you a couple of tricks that some people may not know that you can do. So what I'm going to do is, normally if you haven't watched episode 1 and 2, go back and watch those because it teaches all about getting into the EdgeRouter, accessing it, settings you need for PuTTY if you want to PuTTY into it. That's probably the preferred method. In just about every case, I think that's the preferred method. But EdgeRouter did give you a cool little tool here up in this corner, is that you can actually access the command line right from here. So if I click on this, it gives a second. Now the reason I don't use this in production work usually, and I'd rather use PuTTY, is because the PuTTY sessions don't time out. This browser times out after a couple of minutes, at least default out of the box. And it's kind of annoying, you know, to have to keep logging into it. So that's why I prefer just using SSH and getting into the routers that way. But this is secure. It is a good way to do it. And if you're already in looking at bandwidth and some other things, you have immediate access to the command line. So that's the tool I'm going to use right now. And this window is resizable. So if you need to get more distance on it, you can expand this window and go that route. So we're just going to do this, and remember our default login, we haven't changed anything yet. We've just been getting the router set up to this point, is UBNT and UBNT, and you log in. Now there's a couple of modes. Once you get into the EdgeRouter, the important thing to remember is that you are now in what's referred to as operation mode. This is operational mode. There's two different modes, operational and configuration mode. Okay, so right now when you just log in, by default you are in operational mode. What that means is that this mode is for technicians that might want to perform several tasks, either fact-finding, just looking and doing some basic troubleshooting and seeing the status of things. They might have to do something like resetting an interface or rebooting the router. So it's operational mode. This is the mode you want to be in to basically do things that operators might do and things like that. But so that's why there's a distinction between configure and operational mode. So in here, in the default operational mode, there's just a whole bunch of things that you can do. Now, one thing, I saw a video from a network administrator that decided he was going to try and muddle his way through an EdgeRouter without any prior knowledge of it. You know, he just decided to take it out of the box and see if he could get through it. And of course, he was used to Cisco. He had no background in you know, Juniper or EdgeOS or those kind of syntaxes. So, you know, he started to realize that he could use the question mark like you can on Cisco routers to get hints. And that's not necessary. In the EdgeRouter, you can actually just hit tab, and that will give you all the possible completions without you having to tell it that you need possible completions. So let's say I wanted to get some information about this router. I can do show, okay, and then you can do version. We've done this in one of the past videos just to find out what you're on. Now notice I typed it out. I don't need to do that. If I wanted to, I could just do show V and hit tab. Well, what it's doing is it's showing me that there are 4 possible completions to the V command. I can show version, I can show VPLS, VPN, or VRRP. So in my case, I want to do version, so I can actually just type E and hit tab again, and it will complete the command for me. Okay, and that'll give me the version of the router and its uptime and things like that. So this is a very helpful command to always remember. Even if you don't know what the next step in your command is, you can still use the tab. So let's say I wanted to see interfaces. I can do show interfaces, right? And that will give me the default Okay, and that shows the abridged, the brief version of the interface. It basically just tells you if the link is up or down and what the IP address is. Okay, so that's something that you can do. But if I wanted to go deeper than that, you know, just like Cisco, hit your up arrow to bring back the last command, I can hit tab again. No need to do a question mark or anything like that. Is there anything that I can add to that command? If I hit tab, oh, there's all these different completions to that command that I can make the command a little bit more robust or anything that I want to do with it. So in my case, I want to maybe see a little bit more about the interfaces. So what I can do is I can do show interfaces, and you will see right here one of my options is details. Okay. So I can just do that. And it's the same command as before, show interfaces. It's just giving me more information, more detailed information. You'll see that on the interfaces, like on ETH1, which is my internet-facing interface, it will tell you, you know, your MAC address. It'll tell you the IP address, the net mask. But what's important about this is it actually tells you the packets that are being transferred, as well as, this is very helpful, the dropped packets. If you end up with dropped packets, this is a very useful tool to figure out, you know, if you got problems with your network on some case, then this is very helpful to find out, is there dropped packets, and that tells you there's a problem you need to track down somewhere. So that's a very helpful command. So anything that you need to do in operational mode. Now there's also something very cool. By the way, if you are caught in, you can see that down here, the colon and the blinking cursor, what that's telling you is there's more to the command. It just didn't have a place to. So there's ways that you can either hit the enter key to give you one line at a time as you're cycling through this, or you can hit the space key to give you one page at a time to get more information. If you're really trying to get through a healthy log file or something, the space bar is very helpful at moving a page at a time. Okay, so there's a difference there between just hitting the enter key that progresses the command one line further. The display of the command results, it will go one line further. If you hit the space bar, it goes one page farther. So that's another little trick to keep in mind. Now, from operational mode, this is something else that's really cool about this. Anyway, to recap, there is your takeaway for this, is use the tab key. Just tab all the time, because the router will pretty much tell you what you can do, and it's very helpful that way. So just get used to using that tab key, and sometimes double tab. While you're in operational mode, there is something else that you can do, is that you got to remember these systems are essentially, they're not just routers, they're actually Linux computers. They're like a Linux server. And with that, there's a lot of things that you can have access to in the operating system itself. Let's say you're trying to find out if there's something else, or maybe you're a Linux guy and you're used to seeing something else for troubleshooting information. What you can do in here is you can actually type sudo and then follow that with a regular command. So what you're doing by doing this is you're saying jump out of the jump out of the router's kind of embedded OS, or I don't know what you would call it, the skin of it, its shell, the router's shell for, you know, the EdgeOS shell, and jump into the Linux operating system. And by doing that, I can do sudo ls, I don't know, let's say etc. You know, so it works just like, I can find out anything about just knowing the basics of Linux. You can navigate in here by using that sudo command, and you can get anything off of the router. You can do sudo home. Oops. Okay, so that doesn't even, oh, I am an idiot. Okay. All right, so in the home directory, UBNT is the only user that's been created so far, so that's good. That's a helpful command. You can start looking for other users on the system. You can do, I'm going back in my old Linux days here. Let's see, sudo who. All right, so I can find out who's logged into this system with that. So again, you can find out anything, and remember that these are computers. By adding repositories, you're not limited to what's on the router. If you wanted to use a router as a TFTP server, as an FTP server, pretty much anything. You can just go in and use the system for that, you know, and by installing other repositories in here, you can actually add pretty much any Linux app into here that you want. You could add another web server. You could do all kinds of things with the router. That's what makes it so powerful. The router is really just the base unit. You can, anything that's supported on Linux pretty much, if you are familiar with it, you can install those things. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So when you're in operational mode, if you do sudo, that will jump you into the Linux OS, and you can use pretty much any command or configuration that way. Okay. So now we've gone over operational mode and some of the things. The key takeaway there is use that tab key. Okay. Also, the main thing to remember about operational mode, it is for doing things to operate the router, resetting interfaces, showing information, looking at log files, rebooting the router, shutting the router down. So operational style commands is what you do from the operational mode. So now we want to go into configure mode. Now in Cisco, you do en or enable, and that jumps you into configuration mode. And the way this OS handles it is if you want to configure things, you just tell it configure. Okay, so when I do configure, notice that the prompt changes. Okay, it went from the $sign to the hashtag. And that tells you that you are in, that's how you know that you're in configuration mode. You also see this edit. So every time you type a command, you're going to see that edit in there. So it's telling you it's in configuration editing. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, there is absolutely no difference between the modes in the way that they work. The tab still works the same way. You can still do all the same things that you did in operational mode. It's just that the purpose of configuration mode is to actually write changes to the configuration and change the way that the router operates, which will also happen at boot. There is a difference, a big difference between Cisco routers and these EdgeOS routers, in that, you know, pretty much on a Cisco router, you type in a command, pretty much it goes active the minute that you do that. It doesn't do that on here. I can change as much of the configuration as I want, and nothing is going to happen. I can always go back and view the configuration. Now, this isn't a configuration tutorial. This is really just a command line basics. But, you know, I just want to kind of get your feet wet on that little bit of information. Is that you can go ahead and change the configuration all you want, and it's not going to change anything. So you don't have to worry about until you type the word commit. Okay, and what commit does is it says take all the active changes in the configuration file that you've written and make them active. So you can type in as many different ones as you want, and you can do that. So let's say I want to see the configuration. Now, since I'm already in configuration mode, the only command I have to type is show. So since I haven't followed it with anything, it knows, oh, show the configuration. And you will see the configuration all laid out right here, and which is very basic. You know, when these things come out of the box, there's not a lot to them. You know, we've already been through a lot of this stuff, the system tab, NTP, that kind of stuff. We've been through that in the past videos. But that's all there is. That's your entire configuration out of the box, so there's not a lot to it. Now, when you're looking at this configuration, it's important to realize that if you ever get stuck at the path, if the tabs aren't working for you and you want a little bit quicker reference, you can always show the configuration. This tells you how to make configuration changes. Let's say I wanted to put a different IP address on ETH2. We already have ETH1 running DHCP, and this is all default. And 1.1 with a 24-bit mask on ETH0. This is all default and out of the box. But what I want to point out here is that everything that you want to change in the configuration is done with basically two prepending commands. It is either going to be set, and that means you're going to be setting a configuration path, or you're going to do delete. Okay, and that means you're going to be deleting a configuration path node here somewhere. Now, if we want to add an IP address here to ETH2, that's as simple as set. Okay, if you don't remember, it tells you the entire path here. Look, I don't even need to do tabs, right? So what I'm going to be doing is set interfaces, right? I'm going to prepend with set because I'm not deleting. I'm going to be adding something on. So I'm going to be doing set interfaces Ethernet, ETH2, and then I'm going to add in the new node that I want to be in there. Okay, so again, if the tabs aren't working for you, but the tabs work just fine. If I don't remember, I can do set, and of course, there's going to be a bunch of those. Okay, so I can set firewall, interfaces, system, whatever. In this case, I'm going to be setting interfaces, Ethernet, ETH2 is the interface that we want to set. And then it's like, oh shoot, well, what do I want to do? Address, again, tab. Oh, okay, I want to set the address. And we'll just make something up for now, 192.168. We have let's do 2.1. And we're going to do /24. This is another distinction between Cisco routers, is that everything is in Cedar notation. You don't do the full 255.255 and going through all that. So if you're not familiar with Cedar notation, or if you can't do those calculations quickly in your head, you probably want to keep a subnet calculator handy so that you can get that down and do that translation of the subnet mask. But all of your address stuff is going to be done in Cedar notation in this OS. So that's just something to keep in mind, and it's just kind of a shorthand. So we're going to set this on our interface, and from there I'm just going to hit enter. Oh, what did I do wrong? It's telling me right there, there's an error. The specified configuration node is not valid. Well, what was my command? Oh, I forgot to type in address ahead of time. So what I'm going to do, and how do I know that? Well, I could either do the tab, which it told me right there, address was the next one, or if I look at my configuration, I say, oh yeah, I need to put the word address before the actual address. So that's another way that I know what's going on there. So I hit my up arrow once, bring back that last command, I can just insert the word address. Okay, it didn't complain. It came back with the edit prompt. Everything's good. And how do I know? Well, I can do show. Oops. And notice that when I look at the configuration, now again, this isn't active yet. It's actually showing me in the configuration what all the steps I applied was. Okay, it's showing me right here that there's a plus, and so that's telling me that I added that line and it is not active yet. Okay, so I can refresh my web page and it's not going to reflect that on that interface because this is not active yet. I can make all kinds of changes to this thing and it will show me in the configuration. So I could just scan and see what I did. So if I make several changes, I can go back and view it. Okay, so nothing's active yet. Now again, remember the colon tells me that there's more to view. So there's two ways to do that. I can either, actually three ways. I can hit the enter key to do one line at a time and scan my configuration, but it's like, no, I know there's nothing else there. So the easy way to jump out of that is just hit the Q button for quit. So if I hit Q, that'll just jump me out regardless where I am in its display buffer. So that's how to get out of there. So if I want to make these changes active, it's pretty simple. You just hit commit. Okay, so when you type commit, that tells that all those changes, whatever has a plus or a minus, and in some cases it's a change, so it might have a different symbol, but all these pluses and minuses will then be automatically applied to the running configuration, and then they will go active. So the minute I hit that, it'll go through the configuration. But I want to show you another command. This is very important for network administrators that may be working on live systems. The last thing you want to do is commit changes and have that sucker lock up and you just brick the router. Now you can't SSH into it, you can't do anything. And so there's a better command sometimes. This is fine if you're just doing work at home, but there's a better command, and that is, in fact, if I just hit tab, it will show you. Okay, my two options are commit or commit-confirm. And This is the same on Juniper routers. Again, all those models that we talked about that use the same syntax have the same commands. And what commit confirm does is, what it does is it applies the configuration changes. Now, in the event you made a change that's going to brick that thing, you may as well have just bricked it, but what it will do is it will automatically reboot the router in 10 minutes if you don't hit confirm. Okay, very important. I've used this several times when I'm working on a live router that people are actually using, and I don't want to risk the changes. What it does is it gives you time to test the commit before rebooting. So anyway, I'm going to do that in this case. I'm going to do commit confirm, and it will tell me. Give it a second. Okay, and it tells you commit confirm will automatically reboot the router in 10 minutes unless you confirm. Do I want to apply these changes? My default is yes, I want to do that. Okay, so I'm going to hit enter. Okay, and it tells you right there, type confirm to stop the reboot. At this point, the counter has started. This router is going to reboot in 10 minutes if I don't remember. But what's good about it is this gives me a chance to make sure that I still have access to it. I can still ping things. I can test my changes and all that. But if I lost access to it and I did something to really mess it up and I brick that thing, it'll reboot to its previous configuration. In that. So in my case, I'm going to go ahead and I've tested my changes. I know everything is good. I'm going to go ahead and type confirm. Okay, now it's going ahead and it's writing all those changes. It's doing everything. All right, and so now those are now set in stone. And if I want to save those changes that I made, I'm going to do save. And that's actually writing to the boot up configuration file. So that you can make sure that those will be persistent changes. They will last through reboots at that point. You have to type save. That's another thing that will get people. You might apply some changes and everything's working and think that everything is good. And in old school Cisco, you used to do write mem, write memory, and then it was copy run start and things like that. So in our case, for the Edge OS, the command is just save, and that's telling you to just save it to make it persistent and make sure that it grabs those the current configuration at boot up. So, and this tells you where that configuration is. So if you SSH in there, you can always just download the file that way. This will actually give you your boot up configuration in that directory. So anyway, I think that's about it. Now, going back to the original point, operational mode versus configuration mode. You notice I'm still in configuration mode, but what happens if I want to do an operational command? Cisco has a thing, and I think if I remember class correctly, I haven't hit Cisco in a long time. Do. You can type do, and that will jump you out to operational mode where you can have access to commands without having to actually exit all the way out of your configuration or your enable mode in order to get access to those. So if I wanted to do operational commands such as ping or traceroute or things like that, I don't have to exit out of configuration mode. I can actually type run and then do ping. Now, what run does is that's like a shortcut to say jump out of configuration mode, go back to operational mode, and run this operational command. So that's what that is. It's a prepending command that just kind of, for that command, jumps back into operational mode. And then from there, I can run my operational command. And that's all working. And of course, if I want to stop this, Control C always gets you out of there. That's about it. So again, the takeaways are there are two main modes of your router. When you log in, you are in operational mode. You can do operational things such as ping, traceroute, interface resets, rebooting of the router, operational things you can do. From operational mode, you can also run sudo commands which give you access to the operating system and all the core components of the Linux operating system. Then you have configuration mode, and configuration mode has the express purpose of making changes to the either running configuration of the router or the boot up configuration. And when you make command changes, or configuration changes, you can take as many of those changes as you like, and nothing will be active until you type commit or until you type commit confirm. Just remember to make sure that if you hit commit confirm, then make sure to confirm those changes if you do, because that's a drag too when your router reboots and you forgot to hit confirm. That's happened to me a couple of times too. So now you got to go back and do those changes again. So just something to keep in mind. Those are your command line basics and how to navigate this operating system. It is pretty different from Cisco in how it works, but I think, when I started using this, when I shifted over from Cisco and started using this as my main router platform, I thought it was very easy to navigate. I was very impressed with it. I thought it was very user-friendly, very intuitive, and very powerful in what I had access to. So, hey guys, like and subscribe, hit the button. If there's something you want to talk about, go ahead and mention it in the comments, but hopefully this was a informative tutorial for you on how to use the command line just as far as the basics go in the EdgeRouter. I'll talk to you later.